A very good evening to everyone present here. Thanks for joining on time. Uh, while we get started, may I request you to post into text chat a quick intro about yourself and your understanding of whether culture influences coaching. Uh, we can have a interesting session there, and feel free to share your thoughts. And I'm sure we'll get educated with Sushma and Rhonda being there. It's just about time, and before we get started, we are I'm just reminding you that we are recording the session, and participants can choose not to participate through the use of a microphone and a camera. Though we would like all of you to have your cameras on and participate wholeheartedly to make the session as engaging as possible. I will also request all of you to keep your audios mute to minimize disruption. Today, we have an esteemed panel of guests in Rhonda Bowen and Sushma Banthia with us. As we go by the session, I request you to post your questions in the text chat. And we hope to cover all the questions later in the session. With that, I'm totally excited about the session and we'll get straight into it. Please put your hand together to invite Rhonda Bowen and Sushma Banthia to take us through the session titled How Culture Ignites Coaching, Bring Your Burning Questions. I'll take a minute to introduce the guests. Combine insights, flexibility, and tolerance, and you have Rhonda. In her role as a communication guide, Rhonda takes on challenging responsibilities such as resolving miscommunication issues in global matrix organizations and cooperating with her clients to find the right words so they can be more efficient, effective, and successful. Her life experience as an American who has lived in Germany since 1983 allows her to find various perspectives for any situation and support those who need not only think out of the box but also face challenges in their professional and personal lives. Her approach to communication across cultures is largely inspired by her clients from more than 70 countries. Her experience with them on their journeys has shaped her life, her business, and vision to the world. In addition to more than 30 years in her own business, Rhonda is also active in many global organizations to improve people's lives, including World Speech Day and Soroptimist International. She also serves as a lay speaker for her church, not only in her own congregations, but many neighboring ones as well. She loves to travel and play the piano. Sushma, who is known to a lot of us, is an ICF PCC leadership coach and facilitator. She has been in the area of people development for over 20 years. She is passionate about helping leaders improve their team's performance. She believes that coaching has to have a holistic approach, and hence she coaches the person, not the problem. Sushma has coached numerous leaders in India and internationally and has loads of certifications uh, like Gino's emotional intelligence practitioner, MBTI, Thomas profiling, strategic leadership, and more. So let us put our hands together to welcome Rhonda and Sushma. I will hand it over to Rhonda and Sushma. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mandar. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.
Very welcome to all of you wonderful coaches. So I'm really excited about this fireside chat with Rhonda. And when we say fireside chat, it's Rhonda and me with all of you, and it's a fireside chat. So Rhonda, over to you. What exactly is fireside chat and how do you look at it?
Okay. Well, I wasn't alive when it was happening, but the fireside chat idea that I know about came from the time when Franklin Roosevelt was the US president during World War II. And he had a radio program that people would sit and listen to on Saturday evenings where he talked to people about what it means to be in the war and all of those things. And since then, many CEOs of companies, for example, travel to various locations around the world and invite a certain number of the employees to come so they can actually sit, in many cases here in Germany, really beside a fireplace and have a chat about what's going on. And so having some input from everybody in the room, and to make sure that everybody gets to talk about the things that are important to them and to help us move forward, that's what I see in a fireside chat.
Thank you. Absolutely. And I hope everyone here who's present has picked up. Jesus, it's a thing where everyone talks. So you know where we're headed with our fireside chat. It's all about getting everybody. Okay, so the first thing we need to do when we have a fireside chat is just let's set up all the logs, right? How are we going to do that? Then after we've set up the logs and, build that little thing, a little or big, and whichever way we want to do it, we've got to gather some sparks so that it can be ignited. And once we ignite it, we start building that bonfire, and then you put your logs in. And of course, when we keep having these logs, and that's the time when everyone gets to participate. And then after that, there's the afterglow and a takeaway. So that's the way we've sort of looked at this whole thing of how culture ignites coaching. Bring your burning questions. Bring your logs. Bring it. Let's set it up. So the setting up. Here we go. Look at the way we've just set it up. Okay. So what exactly is the setting up? Rhonda, you want to just talk a little bit about the setting up, and then we'll really do the setting up for our session?
Okay. This is a picture from southern Germany in the Alps, where at Easter time, they have these huge fires. And if you look at the houses in the background, you know how tall this is. It's something like 12 meters tall. And you notice that it has a structure. But on the other hand, of course, when it's finished, this will actually burn. And when it's done, there will just be ashes at the end, or the glow that we were talking about. So for setting this up, it's just making sure that people come with the ideas about what it is they would like to include in this, and how, when we put it all together, that's when the fire really happens.
Yeah, thank you. So let's set it up now. Let's have the structure. Let's set it up now. And the first thing, since it's all about how culture ignites coaching, and we have the whole thing, let's really do it with permissions. So culturally, what is this about permissions? And we can talk a little bit about it. But first, I know, we said, okay, we're going to record. That's how we do it, right? But if we did it in an international environment, do we just say we're going to record? Or do we say, may I have your permission? And we give people the option to really say, yes, you have the permission, or no, I don't want to participate and I want to go out, or I'm not going to turn on. Right? Similarly, when it comes to taking a photo, we would like to take some group photos. We need your permission for that. We would like your permission to nudge you for time, because it's 6:30 to 8 p.m. IST. We would need your permission to put you into breakout rooms. And we also need your permission to put maybe some questions or some things that maybe you would like to discuss, which may or may not, we may not have time during the session to maybe put them in the parking lot, maybe discuss a little later, or put it in a parking lot and not in the flow and put it later. So how do we take permissions? Do we do it one by one, Rhonda, or do we just take everybody's permission for everything? And is it a thumbs up, or is it a chat box? How do we do this? Over to you, Rhonda.
Well, for me, I always say, if I'm in a group and I've made the choice to come here myself, and these permissions are not things that are really, really difficult, I would say we will assume that everyone says yes. If you have a problem with any of these, I personally would suggest that you write an individual message to one of us who are hosting today, and then we can get back to you specifically on how that works. This is a group, but if there are individuals who need individual attention and there's something you would like to specifically say about any one of these, please feel free to reach out to Sushma or me, and then we will get back to you on how we can do things for you. Okay.
Okay. So we've got something going here. Let's just see. Right? Yeah. 1 second. Let me just see. Okay. So some of the things that we sometimes look at is, hey, permissions to annotate. Do we give permissions to annotate to our participants, Shanti?
Your choice.
So I think we will look at it and say, okay, with certain permissions we will withdraw from our side and certain permissions we will seek from there. Yeah. So there's a question, and I think Johnny has raised his hand. So could we just take that? Johnny, please go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you, Sushma. Just it's not a question; it's just an observation which I realized about a year and a half, 2 years back when I was preparing for my PCC recording. I used to start with this permission, and then I realized when my mentor said, "In your recording, you have asked for permission, but if you look at the sequence of action." You have actually started recording and then seeking permission. So that got me to realize that when you actually record, you say, thank you for giving me the permission, which means the assessor knows that you have already sought the permission before recording and then. So that was a very subtle nuance, which I realized I thought I will share in this context. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Johnny. That's wonderful. And this is what we request everyone here for this fireside chat. It's all about contributions. Please bring and set it up and set the logs up so that we can continue this fireside chat. It's not about Rhonda and me sharing with you. It's about all of us sharing with each other. Thanks so much, Johnny. That's wonderful nuance. Right. So what's next on the agenda, Rhonda? Is there anything more, or should we proceed? Do we have anybody who says anything in the chat box?
Well, we've got some.
Yes, Esther says, how do you deal with people saying no or wanting to say no and not having the courage to oppose? Asking for permission itself is a cultural phenomena. Esther, welcome. Would you like to unmute and just join us?
Absolutely.
Yes, Esther,
I don't
welcome.
Hi. Not in all cultures you can ask people directly and have them answer honestly.
So would you like to tell us, when you say our country, a little bit about your background and where you're calling in from?
Oh, sure. I'm calling on from the US, easternmost part of the US, and I'm talking of, say, Turkey, where you don't necessarily, first of all, oppose. And secondly, if you do, you pretend everything is fine and you say, yes, please. And even if the other person asking you is rude, you're always polite in response.
Thank you. Rhonda, would you anything to add here?
Excellent. There are so many distinctions among this, and except for some people here who are here today, and thank you to those who came because of my invitation. For most of the people in the room, this is a closed group. This is a place where you have certain rules and regulations and ways that you do things as your chapter. And therefore, traditionally the habits and the rituals that go into your meetings. And Sushma informed me about those things in advance, but said we wanted to look at these things as well. And because some people have joined us who are not a member of your organization, it's really, really nice to have the idea to actually stop and think about it so that when you're out working with people, is everybody really already part of the group? Or are there people who need to be brought in and included and maybe even be informed about how things normally work around here? Because that's one of the biggest things that happens in culture, especially now that so many of us are online. We aren't necessarily familiar with the cultures of the people where we are having a chance to interact. So this is a wonderful discussion. It will get us started on lots of other wonderful things that are coming that have a lot to do with that as well.
Yeah, thank you, Rhonda. And that's, all these sparks. We're just collecting all the sparks and getting ready to ignite. Yes, moving right along then, if it's okay with everyone. It's like again, as you said, there's a certain group where we're already familiar with the ways of working, but when it's a new group, it may be a good idea to just revisit some of them. And these are some obvious ones, which be on mute when not speaking, be present, participate, because it's a fireside chat with all of us, as Rhonda has already mentioned. Give all a chance to speak, especially in the breakout rooms. Whenever you want to, just as Johnny has already done, raise a hand, electronic or real, to speak. Be sensitive to confidential sharing. Okay, so be time conscious, and we have honor all ideas. And anything else that you think we need to add to this? Is there anything else that comes to your mind that we need to add to this?
If you don't want to speak, just go ahead and write it in the chat. This is always work in progress. We can always improve these things as well. So be fair to everyone. I'm seeing in the chat from Binod. Thank you, Binod.
Right. Anyone else? Okay. So in the interest of time, should we just move on? We're collecting all the sparks. Thank you so much. Let's move on. Okay. So we thought, the first thing we should do when we're saying collecting the sparks is all about, here are 3 quotes about what exactly is culture. We talk about culture. And we thought, yes, Mandar had very nicely said, please write it in the chat box. What is it? And what do you think? Does coaching really matter with culture? And does culture come into the coaching aspect of it? How does it come in? Here. But let's look at what exactly is culture. So I'd like you to just read these 3. See which one is the one which you get called towards. After this, I'm going to request Shanti, we'll keep this on for about 3 minutes so everybody gets a chance to read it for themselves, gather their thoughts. And after that, we're going to go collect more sparks in a breakout room. And Shanti, we could put people into the breakout room for 6 minutes and groups of about 4, right? Where people can go and discuss what is this whole thing about culture, get to know each other, just say hello, and then we can come back and then we can take it in a broader perspective. Would that be okay with everybody? Thank you. Please to take a photo. What do you think? We had a request for a photo, right? We took permission. Because generally what I find is, when people come back out of a breakout room, they've had so much fun in the breakout room that you can see nice, good smiles and energy. So let's keep that going. And if those who are not on camera, and if you're okay to come on camera, and on the count of 3, just give us your best smile and whatever reaction you want to give. Okay, is that okay with everyone? All right. So 1, 2, 3. Give me your best smile. Got it. Thank you. All right, Rhonda. Who would you? What is culture? Let's find out from a few of our friends here. And in the interest of time, let's do just maybe 2 or 3 people speak right now, and then we could move on. That's okay?
Great.
Yeah. So any insights that you got when you were in the breakout room and sharing with peers on culture, or any questions that you have? Anyone who would like to share?
No, I was just saying that we just got started and it looked shorter than 4 or 6 minutes. So.
That's the beauty of breakout rooms and fireside chats. It always seems, hey, I want more.
Well, Ravi was saying something very interesting and we had to go out in mid-sentence. So.
Okay, so would it be okay if Ravi could continue here? Which Ravi was it, Panikar or Srinivas?
Srinivas.
Okay, Ravi, Srinivas, would you just like to continue here? Invitations open to you. You may be...
Sure, I can do that. So, Shamik, what is it that I was saying that triggered you so that then I can continue in that.
No, I was, there was this concept about culture, as in, the culture in the north of the country, the culture in the south, the Japanese culture, etc. And then there is the organizational culture.
Yeah.
So my point was suddenly when both Raka and Ravi had brought about these different aspects, and it occurred to me that when you're talking about the organizational culture, irrespective of whether you're a Japanese or a Chinese, we all come under the organization's culture, that umbrella. So that's what triggered, and Ravi just about started, mentioning an anecdote, and then we had to split. I'm sorry to put you on the spot, Ravi.
No, that's fine. That's a good culture, Shamik. Especially in a fireside, I think that's good because you're supposed to give me a drink, okay?
Yeah, I'm having it.
Yeah. Okay. So, Sushma, what I was saying was, I was talking about how the social culture impacts the organization culture. So I used to look after right from Asia Pacific and Japan, right from Japan to Pakistan, including China and all that, and up to Australia and New Zealand. And and we had some, what can I say, some specific organization values which we had to carry on. And one of them was a gender specific one. How many people are there from this gender? At that time, LGBT was not there, but it is basically male and female gender. And there are some specific target that one as an organizational head had to fulfill. In Japan, we had to have that removed because it just wasn't working. I'm now talking about maybe 20 years plus back. So that was one of the things which I was sharing when we got pulled into them.
Sure.
Right.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. Can we just go to Venkatesh Prasad, please?
Yeah.
Venkatesh, would you like to unmute?
Yes.
Thank you.
We had Mr. Srinivas and Nancy in our group. So in unison, we discussed that, culture actually stems from the values and belief systems which we imbibe from our parents. It starts from a childhood. And as we grow up and then we move from, get into a corporate world, then that's the time when, when the corporate organization also has got a culture. And that's the time when we really look at it, hey, is my culture aligning with the organization culture? Very, very important. And then if not, if my value systems are deeply rooted, probably what happens is maybe I might have to look out for a better option or a readjust. I once again, put on a different frame and try to sail in that boat in that new, in that organization by aligning myself with the culture. That's what we discussed.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. So here comes Esther's question. Are cultures exclusive of others or inclusive? So bring your burning questions. That was it, right? How cultures ignite coaching and bring your burning questions. So here are the burning questions. Rhonda, over to you, and then we can, or should we just hold the burning question? What do you want to do, Rhonda?
I'd like to ask Esther if she'd like to say exclusive of others in general or exclusive of other specific groups, if she's making the distinction.
A culture is, it depends on how you define the concept of culture. And within a culture, there are broad group, sort of smaller groups within the culture. And with all of the DEIB consciousness in the US, we talk about having to be inclusive. But the whole word of a culture is that it's inclusive only of those people in it. And the funny thing is, Rakshmik in my group, he talked even about filters in the group. And to me, a culture is a culture that is more dynamic and open towards other people's opinions, cultures, and whatever. So on one hand, you define it as being limiting. On the other hand, you can have it open. So I'm puzzled. I don't really know the answers.
I think you've brought up a very good point about the fact that a culture, when it defines itself as a culture, thinks of a certain group of people who belong to it. The question for me is not how many hundreds or millions or thousands of cultures do we have in the world, because if you got it down to very sort of mini micro kind of cultures, you could have, I don't know how many different groups. But on the other hand, for me, it's the culture standing as opposed to who are we and who are other cultures and how we interact. So for me, it's not a matter of being inclusive or exclusive. It's automatically inclusive by the definition, as far as I'm concerned. But the whole point is, how does this culture interact with other parallel or similar cultures? And the fact that they are not excluding others is a decision that the culture makes. And there are cultures that make a very big decision, like secret societies. You're not allowed to say anything. You're not allowed to give away any of the background, all of those things. They make a decision not to be not only not inclusive, but they want to be exclusive in the other meaning of exclusive, meaning higher up or better or whatever you would like to say, as opposed to what we do, we don't want anybody else to know about. So for me, there are a lot of different things that are playing a role there. But it's a wonderful question. Thank you, Esther.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Yeah, to keep your burning questions coming. It's okay to move on right now. And, we've got some sort of an idea of what is culture, and we got the sparks going. And let's see, what do we go next? Let's do the igniting. And for the igniting, it all starts with, as we've already seen, and while you all were in the Zoom and the breakout room, I was just going through the chat box, and all of it. Yes, culture does impact coaching. It is definitely there. And Ravi Srinivasan and Srini had also written things about different types. And what we thought when we were looking at it was, we thought that there are three different aspects that we would like to explore deeply. One is the geographical, the organization, and the team culture. So if you could just give us a little bit of a description of each. It's a little bit would be obvious, but Rhonda, if you could just talk a little bit, and then let's find out from all of ourselves, because we're all here for our fireside chat. Which one would y'all, really like to explore more deeply today? And depending on the general consensus, we'll take a poll, and depending on the general consensus, we would look at that one first, and then the second, and then time permitting, the third part also. So, Rhonda, would you just like to say a sentence or so?
Yes. Part of my work in cultures, I explain to people that I don't talk about intercultural communication or cross-cultural communication, the classic terms I'm sure you hear all over the place, but I talk about communication across cultures. And you may think that that's just a language or a semantic thing, which is my background. But for me, it's very important to make the distinction between, especially the first two. Geographical, you all know. We're not all from the same country here in the room today, so we are bringing different nationalities. For all of you who are located in India, you have such a wonderful range of geography, languages, religions, all different kinds of cultural backgrounds that even within India, it can be very interesting. When I speak to people here in Europe and they say, Rhonda, what do? I talk to this guy in India and I don't understand him. And what does that mean? I said, well, where is he from? And they say, well, how do I know he's from India? And I say, yeah, but if you see how many official languages there are in India, that's like saying somebody's from Europe. I can't tell you what that is. There are so many different languages. There are so many different accents. If you talk to somebody in Spain and you talk to somebody in Poland, those are two totally different worlds and languages. And I said, in India is the same way. So understanding geography is not only geography, like what does it say in your passport? Okay, there are many other things that go along with geographical as well. Organizational is the thing that I personally have problems with because a lot of people talk about silos in organizations. I grew up on a farm if you've never been inside a real silo with feed for an animal, you don't know why you're saying silos in a company, because companies don't have anything as terrible as silos. So I don't talk about silos. I talk in organizations about getting through the glass walls. Everybody else talks about getting through the glass ceiling. You know, how do you go from this level up and be promoted to another level? I always say you can't get through the glass ceilings before you get through the glass walls. Everybody thinks they know what's going on in other departments, in other teams, in other locations. Everybody thinks that it's obvious what's going on, but those glass walls are just what it looks like in a meeting room. You know, you've got a room and you've got the next room, and you can see everybody in the next room, but you can't hear what's going on, and you're not getting all the input. So organizational things for me, getting through the glass walls is just as important as knowing what country does someone come from and what language do they speak, and what does that have to do with the way we look at culture. And then, of course, there's the culture within a team. And a team could have differences in geography. A team could be all within one organizational group, but it could also be cross-dimensional. So maybe there are people in a team from many different parts of the organization. And a team often has aspects of both of the other two, but a team, if it's a very good team, sometimes defines its own culture, which may be in line with the geography in the organization, but may also not be. And I know that more and more people in the coaching world are getting into team coaching because we all realize that we do so much better if we're doing things together than if we're doing them alone. And teams need more and more help. And so that's why we said those were the 3 points today that we thought, based on the work that we're doing and where we live and how we're trying to make progress in this, those would be the 3 parts that we would like to look at today.
Thank you. Thank you, Rhonda. Johnny, you had a question or something to
Yeah, I do have a question to Rhonda. So this is in connection, in line with what you just shared, Rhonda. I had a client in Geneva, and she's head of a very big function of a large global organization which is headquartered in Geneva, and this company has a huge market presence in Russia and a large manufacturing unit in Ukraine. And they have people from Russia and Ukraine working in the headquarters. So after the lockdown, when people were excited to go back to work and see each other, boom, came the war. And there was a eerie, cold silence. And this coachee of mine was sharing, saying it was very uncomfortable to go back to office because, you know, people from Ukraine, people from Russia, and we have a big market presence. Our clientele is in Russia, our manufacturing is in Ukraine, and we're at the headquarters. So which out of these 3 would, or is it a mix of all 3? Just would like to have your view on this.
That's a wonderful question. And I would say that there's a huge distinction to be made. And those of us who live in Europe are confronted with this very often now with the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. There are many people who have left Ukraine and have come to Germany. For example, over 1 million Ukrainian people are living in Russia and Germany at the moment. And there are fights taking place here. So Russian and Ukrainian people are also getting into trouble and having physical conflicts with each other because they're both living in Germany at the moment. And we also, though, have things about Russian people who have lived in Germany for a very long time going out and helping Ukrainian people because they speak a similar language and they know geographically and culturally what it meant for them 10 years ago to come and live in Germany, and therefore they are now helping Ukrainian people. So it's very hard to say just because this person is from Russia and this person is from Ukraine, and what does that mean when they're somewhere else? There are people doing it this way and there are people doing it this way. And I'm sure everything in between. I know that's not a huge help, but I think it really comes down to checking with individual people to see how well they're doing with this. For example, the Ukrainian ballet, the state government ballet, went to Paris to do a show and decided not to use any Russian music. So they had to change their entire program around. So there are many, many different ways that this is coming off. And I think it's really important to be in good contact with the people who are involved and find out what's going on with them first, because it's a very hard thing to just make, a blanket statement for everyone, according to my experience.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, Rhonda. And thanks, Johnny. Shanti, over to you.
Yeah, Rhonda, when I saw these three distinctions, another layer, and I don't know where to fit it, that's why this question is, I'm giving it the name societal culture. Let me explain what I mean by it, and I just want to figure it out where it sits. It is not bound by geography or organization or team. It is what we may carpet under, what is okay in the society and not okay in the society, what is acceptable, not acceptable. That becomes culture. And within the geography, it may differ. Within an organization, it may differ. Within a team, it may differ. Certain things may be acceptable. Certain things may not be acceptable, only because the societal pressures. Where would you put that distinction?
Well, when you say when you say societal, do you mean people living within a special place? Or do you mean society as a whole, like throughout the entire world? Give me your definition of society, first of all.
It is broader. It is the entire world. But there are influences of geography, there are influences of organization, and there are influence of team on the societal culture.
Mm-hmm. Because for me, society is, for me personally, is more the way a certain group of people organizes themselves. And that therefore, I would wonder if society has also, in this case, something very, very strongly to do with values. Does that may fit into what you're thinking of as well?
Yes, and probably broader, definitely values. And the culture is also changing as the value systems of the newer, younger generation is changing. Yeah, it is not restricted to a region or a geography or an organization, but overall, the humanity is too big a word. I don't want to go there. Yeah, it's like there is a change. Where will you put that change in terms of culture? What is acceptable in the society and not acceptable in the society?
Well, I think you've made a wonderful point. There have been a couple of points that have been brought up before, the DEI movement in the US, the generational distinctions, as you mentioned, that are being made now. How old is someone? I think there are so many aspects to society, and I think that depending on where you are in the world physically, you look at those things in a different way. I'm American. I was born in the US, but I haven't lived there since 1983. When people started talking to me about DEI, first of all, I had to go look it up because I didn't know what it meant. It was being used very actively in American society before it got anywhere else. And today there was, in the state where I live in Germany, there was a new survey about how we in German have to take various things from gender things, and like she and he and whatever, but behind people's names that you see in Zoom very often. But in the German language, we have to do very different things with each individual word. And people were talking, they call this gendering in German. And they were talking about how important is gendering, and that has reduced over the last 2 years. People in Germany don't think that's as important as they did 2 years ago. So even those things that we see, they're shifting also because of time. They're shifting because of other things that are possibly coming in. I don't know why the people have answered the survey the way they did, but that there's this constant change. And I don't know if trying to give it a name like generational, like society, like whatever, all these other things it could be, makes it really, for me personally, really, really difficult, because it's such a fluid thing. And if after 2 years this has changed so much in Germany, for example, then what does that mean for all of the rest of us? Okay, you could say that's a German specific thing or in my state, but it could also be indicative of other things as well. So it's a wonderful question. I don't think we'll answer it completely today, but it's a wonderful thing for us to continue pondering on. Thank you, Shanti. Yeah?
Thank you. Okay, so we've had some sort of intro to all this, and I think it's already been ignited, and the bonfire is already there. And to continue that, let's find out more and get more people. And it is all about what is this? This one, yeah.
Yes.
Which cultural distinction would you like to explore today? So you have to choose your top priority here.
This is one of my favorite parts, watching all the numbers come in. I love this.
Absolutely.
Keep your votes coming. This is great. This is my favorite fun part.
Okay, so as anticipated, because we're all coaches here and have been doing coaching for some time, as anticipated, yes, and it stopped moving. So let's look at it, and let me just end per poll. Yeah, the vote goes for who's the winner? Yeah, no prizes for guessing. Can you see that? I was guessing that it would be organizational culture, followed very closely by team. And most of us are alert and aware, but I think we could see. So in organizational culture, what else would we like to go deeper into? What are some of the burning questions? How do we want to take that, Rhonda? We just finished the poll.
Yeah.
I'll do a stop share.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Wonderful.
So, yeah. So here it is, all burning. Now what do you like to do? It's ignited and you can see it's all, yeah. And I'm going to stop sharing this part. How would you like to do this part? And tell us more about your experiences with organizational culture, and then let's get everybody to bring their logs. So
I'd like to start by sharing a quick story about a client that I worked with individually. And then she came to me one day and she said, Rhonda, I'm going crazy. I work in a matrix organization. We produce software. It's a SaaS company. It's a big American company. It's all the people in Germany that I work with. And she said, Rhonda, I am the manager of the middle department of a row of 5 departments that all talk to the same client. We all have different jobs to do in each of these 5 departments, but we all have contact with the client. And the biggest problem is the client asks a question of 3 different people and gets 10 different answers. And they're totally confused and they don't know what's going on. And it's because internally, we are not coordinating well enough and doing the right kind of handovers from one position or one company or one department to the next. And therefore, we're having lots of times when, for example, my colleague in sales gets asked a question about implementation, which is what I'm responsible for, and tells the client something and says, oh, yeah, you're starting next month. And then the client comes to me and says, oh, I hear we're starting next month. And she says, who told you that? Yeah, the guys from sales. The guy from sales has nothing to do with implementation. He can't make those kinds of statements. But what is he doing? He's trying to make the client happy. And of course, the quicker you start something, the better it is for the client. So he's saying something to make the client happy, but he ends up doing exactly the opposite. Not only for the client who finds out, no, we're not starting next month, we're starting in 3 months because the lady who's in charge of it is now saying so, but is also making people unhappy between what is happening with the salesperson and what's happening with my implementation manager. So the whole point of talking about organizational culture and how we actually deal with things, and so we get out of our silos, or we actually look through this glass wall and communicate with the people all the way down the line, is something that I think is very, very important. And when I talk to people in organizations, I often hear this, well, you know, Rhonda, I'm an engineer. I can't talk to those marketing people. They just don't get me. And those people could be people who all grew up in the same hometown, all speak the same language, now work in the same company, but the cultures are so different that they have no idea of how to communicate with each other. And so for me, getting through organizational things, at least in my work at the moment, especially now that we're doing so many things online, it's not where you live. It's not what language you speak. It's not a lot of those things that we used to think about as being so difficult. But for me, I'm finding it's more about, oh, those guys over there in the other building, they don't know what we're doing, and they keep telling people the wrong information. And that's where I'm seeing huge gaps in organizations. And the culture is different from one place to the other, but nobody's sitting down communicating about what those differences in culture are. And I think that's a wonderful opportunity for us in coaching to make sure that we not only are working with the people maybe in one department or in one team, but helping them become aware of what's going on in other places and encouraging them to say, you know, yeah, maybe we should sit down into those guys in the engineering department. Maybe we should talk to them before we write the next marketing piece, because maybe it's not really the way they think that they will be able to fulfill the promises that we're making to the market, for example. All right. So that's just an example. And I'd like to use that just to get any of your comments. I'm looking to see what I'm seeing in the chat as well.
Right.
Yes.
So
Very
let's
good.
have that nice, cozy fireside chat. Your questions, your contributions, start adding the logs. Organizational culture. Is Jagdish still here? Jagdish, would you like to, because you had put in the chat that that was your in area of interest too?
Hi, I mean, I had said I'm interested in geography and teams, not
Oh,
organization.
sorry. Did I miss? Okay, sorry. Sorry, geographical and team. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, Jagdish.
No problem.
Anyways, would you like to add something here, and then we could take somebody else?
No, I think you go to somebody else right now. So that's
Sure.
good.
Thank you, Jagdish. Right. Yeah. So anybody else in organizational culture? Any questions here?
Yes.
Yes, Shami, please go ahead.
Sushma, I'd like to share something. Between 2010 and 2018, I sort of headed the operations of a niche US-based product development company. They were into software. Now, and they were planning to set up operations in India and Bangalore. It was the first footprint outside of the US. Now, in the US, the culture, there were just about 100, 150. They had a fantastic culture. They had all sorts of games, and you walk into the pantry, the fridge was full, everything. So when the CEO, when we were setting up the operations, his brief was, I want you to replicate the culture we have in Madison, Wisconsin, in Bangalore, India. He said, with the pantry, do all of that stuff. And I had my doubts. I tried to speak to him and tell him that, let's take it slow. But he said, no, this is what we do. We can't differentiate between, folks in America and Indians and stuff like that. So I did that. I stocked the fridge and stuff like that. You won't believe, with the first week, the first Friday, the whole thing was empty. Everyone took stuff home, and that was my experience. And then I had to, gradually let them know, and that's why it took a few months for them to understand that we can't exactly replicate what they're doing, and they're doing it very well there. It had to be done, it had to be sort of customized, the Indian kind of thing. So that was a pretty interesting experience, and it took me about 6 months because I had to be very aware of the fact that I didn't want the CEO to think that this guy the head of the operations is trying to control the stuff and, do that. So it was a pretty dicey thing, but it was an interesting experience. I thought I'd just share it with you all.
Yeah, thanks, Shamik, for sharing that. I do see Nikhil putting in the chat box, and Nikhil, would you like to just unmute?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
No, this is really what Rhonda was saying about Matrix, the example of the Matrix organization. My experience has been with two different organizations that went in for this. And there was a big challenge with, the change of the culture. As in, the existing culture was not really, and this was global, I'm saying, not just in India, getting used to what was really expected for a Matrix organization to work, right? I don't know if the other aspect, the other end of the spectrum is a little more hierarchical in the sense people know, who's going to be the customer-facing person, right? And who makes the decisions. So really, I think it's also links with, what we had discussed in our little group. It's about perspective taking, right? Any cultural challenge is solved by better perspective taking. Yeah. And I think that's, linking it to coaching, in my mind, is possibly that's the challenge, right? How do you generate better perspective taking to understand where the other person is, how the other person is perceiving you, right? So, no one took, an example from what I understood, what Rhonda shared, no one took the perspective of the customer, right? They're getting all kinds of commitments from different sides. And, you mentioned to make the customer happy, right? And just the opposite happened. So that's interesting. Yeah.
Exactly.
So if we were coaching somebody, how would we make them aware of all this, and how would it impact the way we coach?
Yeah. I think that's coming to the coaching. Yes, it would be okay. My immediate insight is, checking on how fluent they are in taking the perspective of others. Yeah. So once you begin to do that, it may not be easy, but once you begin to explore that, things happen. At least you might know that, they need more context. One of the things we had discussed was, say, from India, when the way we talk and understand each other, even if different paths, if you're going to talk to someone from another, say Europe, America, you need to explain that context. And then, you talk about it. So I'm sure, at the end of the day, human beings are human beings, but there is that veneer of culture which you need to get beyond.
Great. Yeah, thanks so much. The question that's coming to my mind is, okay, we know things, that we know these differences. We as coaches can probably see it because we're external. And, as Rhonda, you said, it's all about breaking the walls, not the ceilings. If you're coaching somebody, what's your advice? How do we go about it? Especially if somebody's not able to see it, or there's resistance, or there's you don't understand our organization type of a mentality. Would love to hear from Rhonda and others too.
I'd love to hear from others first, because there was an interesting organizational question also put in the chat. Esther talked about teal organizations versus non-teal organizations. I'm not sure if everybody in the room is very familiar with teal. I'm only a little bit familiar with teal, but that was something that had also come up in the organizations thing. That was a nice question that's been asked. So anybody who would like to answer Sushma's question, and maybe in conjunction with Esther's question, that would be great. I'll throw in my 2 cents at the end. That's what I'm good at.
Anyone? I think maybe
I don't know how to pronounce your name, but the person who wrote in the chat about scarcity and abundance. Can you tell me how to pronounce your name, please?
My name is Sriram.
Sriram. Okay, thank you. How do you see scarcity and abundance playing into this?
Yeah, when the case was, when the case was discussed about Indian mindset about the US company which wanted to replicate the culture in India also, I had a similar experience way back in 90s. There used to be popcorn machines we installed in one of our companies. At that time, we were watching at what time people go and all these things. HR was watching it, but we wanted us a break at 3:30 or 4 p.m. so that these guys can have a quick break at the coffee table with the popcorn. So same thing happened initially. When they were every 1 hour people were going to the popcorn machines. It took some time, 1 month or 1.5 months for them to understand that why the popcorn machine is there. So what is happening is, if I look at it in Indian culture, we normally work on our scarcity mentality. Especially it has come now a little bit better, but as a 90s kids, we have seen the scarcity too much. So when something is coming, we grab it. It takes time. So when it is today, my son is different. My granddaughter is different. They have got plenty. They don't do that. So that's why I mentioned, on that case, that it's a difference between scarcity and abundance mindset. Thank you.
Thank you.
So also this would be where generations also come in. The age which Johnny had put in the chat box, what about age and generation, the things, how it impacts, as you just rightly said, Sriram, the way somebody who's in their 60s would look at it versus the 30s versus their Gen Z. Definitely, because of what they used to would be very different. Their whole attitude, behaviors, etc., and would impact again the culture, right, and their behaviors. Yeah, sure, Jagdish, go ahead.
Yeah, the similar age thing. When COVID was just getting over, when it was lockdown was getting over, rather not COVID. Lockdown was getting over. I got a client from a contact. She's a 14-year-old. First, I refused because I was not knowing how to coach. I'm 67 today. It was 66 when I 65 maybe. So I don't know how to coach her. It took some time, but she said, "You've done a wonderful job with others. I got a feedback, but why don't you try?" So it took some time for me to approach her. So the age is certainly again another cultural thing.
Right. Thank you, Sriram. Jagdish, please unmute.
Yeah. Hi. When I was listening to all this, I just thought of something which came up in my career a few decades ago, and I thought I'll share it here. And what really struck me was when we are trying to change something, we need to give it some time for the people to understand the essence of the change and the benefits of the change. And to make my statement a little more clear, let me give you the example of what I tried. I was getting this feeling that my entire organization, which was pretty large, we were firefighting most of the time, and we were not thinking enough. And when I said this to my executive committee, they said, we're working so hard, we're working 12 hours a day, and you're saying we're not thinking. So for me, it was like they were not really understanding where I'm coming from. And so I asked the question, instead of asking it to them, I asked it to myself. I said, maybe I'm not thinking enough. So if I want to think and contribute at a different level, what is it that I need to do? And the answer came to me that, I asked myself the question is, for me to think, what is it I need? And then the answer I got was be under the sea. So I really dwelt upon that, and I said, be under the sea. And because that was really the place I could, sort of perhaps be away from everything and yet be thinking and getting my ideas. So I actually created a room which was under the sea in my office. And we broke the facade and of the four walls, and we had fish, a huge fish tank. So fish was coming from behind the facade, and We actually had bean bags and pebble stones, and we created the plaster of Paris sea animals on the walls and everywhere else, and we actually had a dim blue light, which gave the feeling of being under the sea. And we inaugurated it with some great fanfare. And the next 3 months or 4 months, most of my CEOs, most of my vice presidents came back complaining, saying, "Boss, you have created a monster. People are going there and sleeping." And I said, "Give it some time, give it some time, give it some time." And you won't believe this. It took us a year or more. And I insisted that we give it time, though they were not happy with what I was trying to do. But a year later, I found all my young engineers who were spending time in that think tank room were coming back with brilliant ideas. And that's when I told my executive committee, this is the fruits of our patience. We have to give our youngsters what they feel is required for them, and create the environment for them to think different. You can't say think different and not create the environment. So you have to create the environment, and that is culture for me. The culture is creating the environment for people to perform at their best. I do not know whether I've added to your value or taken it away. Thank you so much, Sushma.
Thank you, Jagdish. Thanks so much for that wonderful sharing here. I mean, there's just so much that we could just go on and on and on. I know Anant Narayan. You had raised your hand. Would you like to speak? And then we could just move on in the interest of time. Right?
Yeah, no issues. So I'll be short as quick as possible. So to answer what Sriram just said,
go ahead.
About a perk, it's a question of entitlement versus a perk. If you look at the employees, they looked at it as employment. Coming from a scarcity, you look at it as an entitlement. Coming back to what Jagdish said, very interesting, because it's also adapting to the new generation, which is a different culture. So our old systems, our old management jargon, our old control and fire, whatever you could call it, doesn't work with the new generation. They like to experiment. They like to play with the canvas. And probably that's a cultural shift we are seeing in the millennial generation now.
Yeah.
And as coaches, are we adapting to it is the question we need to ask ourselves.
Yes, very important, right? When do our unconscious biases and our own personality come into the picture?
And how do we make sure, I'm going back to something that I'm seeing in the chat, which is really wonderful, what creates a better culture in organizations? And some things were listed: leadership principles, vision, structure, money. Now I'm hearing an under the sea area. I'm hearing lots of wonderful things. What is actually there to build the culture? And the question is, who is making the decisions on that? And if we are external and we're not part of the company, we are obviously not making any decisions, but we are helping the people who are making the decisions, or we are helping the people who are helping the people who make the decisions, depending on where we are as looking in the thing. And to go back to Esther's question from a while ago, is there a difference between a teal and a non-teal organization? I will just say for brevity's sake, teal is an organization where people organize themselves, as opposed to having a very hierarchical structure where everything comes from top down, to give it a very short definition, if you're not familiar with it. And the question, of course, for that is, how much awareness does there have to be then in a teal organization among everyone, versus in organizations that have very strict departmental things, or even divisions where the automotive division does things that are very different from the aerospace division or whatever it is? that those things play a very big role on what exactly helps improve the culture, because the culture may not be for the entire organization. It may only be for certain parts. It may only be for all those nice young engineers who were coming up with these great ideas. It could be for so many different things. And that's one of the reasons why this conversation could go on for not only 1.5 hours, but for 1.5 years if we wanted to really do it well, because there is so much to consider. For me personally, I always say one of my best favorite phrases in life is, if you're inside the bottle, you can't read the label. And I always tell people, I'm outside of your bottle and you know what's inside the bottle, but I read what it says on the outside of the bottle. And I think for those of us who are coaching and trying to help understand, for other people to understand in the company what's happening with the culture, whether it be what my individual beliefs and values have to do with the culture, whether it's what is my team doing versus everybody else, is my division doing something and having a whole different look at things than another division. There are all those things, but awareness is important. I forget the name of the gentleman who said about seeing the other perspective, which is what I really concentrate on in my coaching, because being outside the bottle is a wonderful place for us as coaches to be. And the wine or the whatever drink is inside the bottle is absolutely wonderful. But if what's being written on the outside of the label doesn't reflect that, then there's this disconnect. And I think it's up to us in the coaching profession to help that connection become clear, not only to the individual or the group that we're coaching, but to everybody who's involved in that ecosystem. So that's what I would put in at this moment. And please feel free to comment on what else you think. Yeah.
So just so wonderful, because I'm just relating to it so much. As you said, if you're inside, you can't read the label. Right now, currently, I'm just working with the organization here, and I'm not, even though I'm based in Bangalore, I'm not calling in from Bangalore. I'm in another town called Indore in central India. And the organization I'm working with is, because I'm dealing with different levels, I'm able to see the culture and how the culture has been changing over the past 5 years. And I was just having the chat with the plant head and saying, okay, where do you see it going? Because he said, I need help. He reached out to me to coach him. And he says, what do I do? How do I take it forward? And that's exactly what we're working on right now, to help them to see the way we are looking at it, and then how others and what they need to do and come up as a team. So with that, I'm just going to say, looking at the time, as you said, we could go on for 1.5 years and much more. And there's just so much experience right here with all the wonderful coaches who joined us today. Would you like to just say a couple of things more? Because there are people who are interested in team and coaching, and a little bit more about the geographical coaching, because those were the 3 areas we said and then we could get everybody to put their logs and look at the afterglow. And if it's okay with Shanti, once we formally close at around 8 o'clock, would it be okay to have informal chats?
Absolutely. Lots of them typically stay back and have chats with the facilitators. So please go ahead.
Yeah, right. Thanks, Shanti. If it's okay with everybody, let's do that. So a few comments on the team part and the geographical, and then we look at the afterglow, and then we formally close, and then informally we can just continue.
Yes. Well, first of all, the geographical was the one that had the lowest number of points in the poll. And I don't think it's because it's the one that's least interesting. I think it's the one that's discussed the most. And therefore, I have a feeling among a lot of us here, we know all about that. And it's true. We know a lot about all of that. And I don't think, especially for all of you who live in India or near India, you realize how important geography is just within your own country. And as I said, this is in every country. Yours is big and has such a wonderful variety of things that it's even more prevalent, I think, in your country than in many other ones. But I don't think that that's something that most of us have a problem getting our head around. And especially those of you in India, you have to work with this all the time. And I think it's wonderful the way your country has developed in a way that although I've never been there, but I've worked with lots of people from your country who then have this idea that we all do better together than if we're all into little groups and fighting and nitpicking with each other all the time. To team culture, I would say I'm accredited in team management systems and have been for, 25 years or something. And one of the things the team management systems does very well, and I would like to say that this is a big help for coaching, no matter what kind of a system or an assessment or what kind of training you've had. There are many, many things on the market for teams. So none I think is better or worse than another one, but TMS uses the idea of not only what do you do in your job, but based on your personality, what are the preferences for things you like to do in your job? And I find that people who don't fit well into a team are not people who have difficult personalities or not people who don't understand how to do their work or all the other terrible things that people often say about teams and team members. It's that the team doesn't understand what is the role of each person and why do they like to do things in the way they prefer to do them. And this goes back to this most basic things about, do you prefer to write emails or do you prefer to have meetings, for example? That's a huge thing for a team. Whether your communication is synchronous or asynchronous has a lot to do with how you interact. And therefore, making people aware inside the team that each of us can be having our own preferences for things. And we have to come to a consensus on how we're going to do things, which maybe doesn't reflect every individual's preference, and how we keep that in mind. So the days when there are meetings and Mr. or Mrs. Introvert is sitting in the corner and hates meetings because they're always being asked to contribute and they don't want to, what do we do in those situations? And I think understanding that the team not only has a culture, possibly if it's in a good place as a team, but what each person contributes to that culture may be very different. And we need to keep the individuals in mind just as much as we do the team as a whole. So those are the 2 points I would put in for now. I would like to suggest, when I look at the clock, that we have a moment for people to say, what is it that you're taking away from today? This is sort of the afterglow. For those of you who can stay, I have plenty of time, and Sushma does as well. We'd love to have you stay on, but if not, please feel free to write your takeaway in the chat if you need to leave early. I'm also going to put 2 links in the chat for you to have access to if you haven't met me before, and I haven't met many of you before, so this is a wonderful chance to be looking at this. The first one is an opportunity to connect with me and have an individual talk about whatever came up with today, since there are so many of us in the room. And if you just like to be connected long term and don't have anything specific after today's thing to talk about today, please reach out on LinkedIn. Some of you have done that already. I concentrate on the room. Yes, I've seen you've asked to connect. I will do that after the meeting. Thank you so much for your requests.
So I'm going to request, instead of putting in the chat, we can just capture it and then share with everybody post the session. So there's a Menti link that I have put on the chat. If you could just click on it and say, which log are you really taking away today? What would you like to contribute? You not only just take away, this is the thing I want to say, something that you would say, how does culture impact coaching? What's your tip for everybody, or a tip that you are taking away? If you could just type in that Mentimeter, and then we'll capture it and share it with everyone. Rhonda, I'm sure you could see these.
Yes, I'm submitting my own.
Okay.
I'm very much into, if you're going to do this, then Yes.
Mm. Excellent. Wow. Beautiful. I'm loving it. Cultures are complex systems. Do you coach for the organization culture or the leadership or the people in the organization? Wow. So diverse insights. If you're inside the bottle, you cannot read the label. Need to be clear. Let me see. How do I see this? Need to be clear about what culture is for the coaches, and how it guides our coaching approach. Coaches need to evolve to match the culture of the coachee, their team, and their organization. Beautiful logs right here. Culture is a glue that holds groups of people together, and we need to treat our glue with respect. Find out common elements across cultures. Coach is better off staying outside the bottle to see the distinction what is said and what should be, and coach appropriately. It gives a different perspective to them. Intergenerational culture is so important now to consider for coaches. Okay, so we got some of these. Leadership plays a big role in the culture of the organization. Yeah. So let me see. We've got 10 responses so far. Is there anyone else typing? Something else has appeared in the chat. Blind to the label while inside the bottle. Yes, Johnny, thank you. And there was a question by Esther. And Esther, would it be okay to either park it or just take it after we formally close the session? And yeah, is there something like a team ikigai? Does that create a better team culture? And then as coaches, do we strive for in organizations? What do we strive for in organization, not the leaders?
I've never heard of a team ikigai, but I've never checked on it. So Esther, there may be one and I just don't know about it, but I think it's absolutely wonderful. If you're not familiar with ikigai for yourself, please just put it into your browser and your search engine that you prefer. It's a wonderful Japanese system for deciding who you are in the world and what you can be contributing, just to put it in a very short form. And I think it would be great if there's a team ikigai, and if not, maybe Esther, you and I and Sushma and a whole bunch of other people here should start working on that. That would be great. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much, Rhonda. And I think, it just takes me back to a conversation when we were thinking of how we run this session, and we were talking about monochronics and polychronics. So I've turned from a polychronic culture that I'm really part of. Now I'm becoming a monochronic right now, and my clock says exactly 8 o'clock. And it's Wee Willie Winky runs to the town. Upstairs and downstairs, and yeah, it's 8 o'clock. So thank you so much. And this is exactly where we would end in a monochronic way. And over to Bandha. Is he here?
Yes, I am there, Sushma.
Bandha, thank you. Thank you to Shanti, and thank you to Rhonda, and thank you to everyone for bringing your logs. It's a fireside chat. And now the afterglow, and we continue. Over to you, Bandha. Thank you.
Hey, thanks, and thanks for an engaging session. I think I enjoyed it, and I'm sure we had logs coming in, right? And then obviously moving into the monochronic conversation. So thanks again. Just a quick announcement. The session offers 0.75 core competency and 0.75 resource development CCEUs. So you can log them too. Our next session will be on 20th of Feb, titled The Knowing, Being, and Doing of a Coach. And this will be conducted by Rajat Garg, who a lot of you know in the community. And he'll be talking about what a coach knows, who they are and how they implement their knowledge, and then look it from the ICF core competency perspective. If there are any other questions for Sushma and Rhonda, we can take them.
So big thank you to Shanti and you and everyone here. And yes, now I think we can formally close the session. Would you continue the recording or would you want to stop the recording, Shanti?
I will pause the recording.